be absolutely clear about this, you have no intention of leaving NATO or CENTO?
No, we have no such intention.
What about the United States bases that are here? Is there any possibility that if the Americans keep on their embargo, that you would close those bases and close them permanently?
Well, we would rather call them installations. They are not bases in the proper sense of the term. They are, most of them, are closed, or rather their functions have been suspended for some years, and there is no legal basis at the moment to reactivate them. A new legal basis would have to be negotiated with the United States, and if the embargo is not lifted, obviously that cannot be done.
But then would you have them dismantled? Would they be permanently closed?
Well, I think there is no sense in keeping them permanently suspended.
You've been showing interest in the new relationship with Russia, almost promoting it. You've had the Soviet Chief of Staff here, and you're going to Russia next month. You've indicated that you would like a more multilateral foreign policy. What does that mean?
Détente means a lot for a country like Turkey, which is situated in a very critical part of the world, and we want to make our own contribution to détente. We have a stake in it. And we believe, the Turkish nation believes, and particularly our government believes, that the best and the most peaceful and respectable way of ensuring a country's security is to see to it that it lives in an atmosphere of mutual confidence with all her neighbors and all the countries of the region, and that's exactly what we are trying to do.
But Russia would certainly be glad if you left NATO.
Well, we have never been faced with such a request from any of our neighbors. The existing balance in the world and the components constituting that balance seems to be taken as a reality of our times.
The phrase I think that's used in Turkey now is new defense concepts. What does that mean?
Well, you see, the attitude of our neighbors, which are not our allies, have changed in the positive sense towards Turkey in recent years, whereas the attitude of our only NATO ally in the region has changed in the negative sense. We have to take these into consideration. We have to take the changes in military technology into consideration. We have to take the realities of détente into consideration, and also the fact that Turkey is left alone to a large extent by her allies. All these have to be taken into consideration, and a new defense concept which should make Turkey more self-sufficient.
There are two implications in that. First, what do you mean by self-sufficient? Do you mean getting a more even-handed supply of arms from the communist world as well?
Well, I'm not prepared to talk about the possible sources from which we can get our military equipment. This will emerge as a result of the study we have been undertaking with the objective of formulating a new national defense concept. However, we do want to get away from being from a position of being over-dependent to only one source regarding our military equipment.
Do you mean you'll go to a more neutral position in the world, or is it, as the Greeks like to suggest, a form of blackmail, if I can use such a word, to a prime minister?
Well, you see, the lack of allegiance seems to come from NATO, our NATO allies, and particularly the United States, if the attitude of the negative attitude of the Congress persists. We have to adapt ourselves to the changing realities and to the facts. As I said, we simply cannot afford to let our defense arrangements remain suspended and remain at the mercy of the Congress of an overseas country.
So
we have to
it is an
take care of
ultimatum
ourselves.
in that sense, sir?
It's not an ultimatum. It is a realistic attitude. We haven't threatened or, if I may be allowed to use the term, blackmailed NATO as Greece has done. by retiring from the military structure or by threatening to leave NATO altogether. We only say that our contribution to NATO will be in proportion to the contribution of NATO to Turkey's security. That's all.
But if Congress, if I may persist with the thought, if Congress does refuse to lift the embargo, the logic of your position means you do go into a more neutral position.
Well, as I said, we will have to take care of ourselves to a greater extent than we have been doing. That may have certain political consequences, naturally. But we do not want to upset the delicate balance on which détente is based, because, as I said earlier, we have a stake in détente.
Domestically, sir, you do have economic problems that make our recent ones, or even Italy's, look like molehills to a mountain. You have won some support from the IMF and the international community, but how are you going to get out of your problems?
We did inherit a very heavy burden economically when we took over as government at the beginning of the year, because very irresponsible policies, or non-policies, if I may say so, had been followed in the 3 years that preceded our government. And unfortunately, this period of irresponsibility coincided with a period of world economic crisis to some degree. But we have taken the economic problems very seriously, and we have adopted a very brave and coherent attitude, leaving modesty aside. And we prepared a new program to rehabilitate and reactivate the Turkish economy, to increase production, which had very much fallen down, to increase exports, which also had fallen down very much. And the measures that we adopted have been so convincing, obviously, that the IMF did not hesitate to not only to give the green light as far as Turkey is concerned, but even to offer some credit facilities.
In this context, you are an associate member of the EEC, and it looks as if Greece may become a full member with a veto of any help given to you.
We have started a project of study about our problems with the European Economic Community, and I shall be in Brussels by the end of this month, which will give me a chance to talk with the responsible people there. We hope that the European Economic Community will realize the importance of the problems that exist between the two countries, and if possible, we would like to continue our association.
But also get closer to the communist world.
Well,
You've been to Bulgaria recently and going to Russia.
You see, many of our Western allies, many countries which are in the forefront of capitalism, have already established much closer economic relations and cooperation with the Soviet Union and other socialist or communist countries. They are our neighbors, and we want to establish close ties and cooperation, economically, culturally, and as far as possible in other areas with our neighbors. We want to get along with them and live in peace side by side with them.
The other great problem, perhaps the greatest of all facing you, is domestic violence, which has got even worse during the 4 months you've been in office. Why?
Our government has been able to end, to a large extent, the clashes between groups of different ideologies with the effective measures it has taken and with the unbiased, neutral approach that it has adopted. As a result, the people who want to perpetuate violence in Turkey have taken recourse to the extreme degree and to a very inhuman form of violence, which consists of sabotages and assassination attempts, and they usually use youngsters or even children in order to undertake such violent actions.
But who is this? Is this the right? Is it the left? Or
Well,
is it
you
both?
see, for some years, violence has been mostly coming from the extreme right. And those who were carrying on were given a lot of encouragement by the two coalition governments that preceded our own. And now they are very frustrated because they are losing control of government. They are losing control of the state mechanism. So they are giving their last resistance struggle.
But doesn't violence also come from the left and from other groups, from religious minorities and in the east from the Kurds?
Well, you see, there are violent groups among the Gauchist elements as well.
The left. Mm-hmm.
Yes, illegal fractions of the West. They are mostly in the form of reacting to the violence directed towards the left, but I don't say this as an apology for them. I don't approve of it at all. And the number of leftist and rightist terrorists caught by our government are about the same. The problems of the southeastern and eastern Turkey are mostly social and economical, whereas violence is mostly concentrated in the bigger urban centers.
You still have in this country laws against communism. It is illegal to be a communist. Are you intending to change that?
Well, I think that such bans do not make sense in a democratic countries, because when you have a democracy, all kinds of ideologies do exist, and they do exist in organized form too. So people in Turkey deceive themselves by having communism banned, because we know that groups or parties with such inclinations do exist in Turkey. It is immoral to force them to disguise themselves, and it's unpractical also because you get a confusion. You can't know who is who.
Finally, returning to Cyprus, if the attempt to get a negotiated settlement fails, what options are open to you?
As long as the possibility of a federal independent state of Cyprus, independent, bizonal, bicommunal, and non-aligned. As long as that hope remains, I don't want to think and talk about other possibilities, although other possibilities certainly may be found. But we have always thought, particularly my party, has thought from the 60s onwards, that the best solution in the interest of the Turks and the Greeks and of all the countries of the region, the best solution would be a federal solution. So we are still working with that objective in mind. And the Turkish Cypriot proposals regarding the constitution are very constructive in that sense, although the Greeks claim otherwise. In my mind, the Greek Cypriots do not want a negotiated settlement.